Hi YouTube, this is Joe Calton with Calton Cutlery. You can find me on the web, caltoncutlery.com. Okay, so, I completely forgot what number of videos that we're on in this series. I want to say it's 19 or 20 or something like that. And, bear with me, we're really getting there. It's just I'm trying to pack so much detail into these videos that they're just taking a long time. Okay, so here are two of the new pattern that we're making, right? We got the one in Cocobolo and we got the one in, I think that's cottonwood burl. Cottonwood and box elder smell completely different. But anyway, so we stopped off with rough grinding these handles on the belt grinder. Okay, we shaped them all up with a 36 grit belt, and then we came back over and refined them a little bit with a 220 grit belt. Basically with a 220 grit belt, it's a J-flex type belt, so it's a lot more flexible. So pretty much we just knocked off the sharp corners of, that the 36 grit belt left. Okay, I like to finish off all my handles by hand. I think you just get a little bit more control doing your final shaping and finishing by hand on a handle, because you can shape it and then you pick it up and you feel it and you're like, okay, we need a little bit more here, and it's just it's just something I like to do. Okay, so first things is and I'll show you a couple of different ways to do a couple of the operations that we're doing here, just so that you got kind of, and there's other ways to do this. I mean, there's other ways to do everything that I've shown you so far. It's just that what I've been showing you are, my favorite ways, or the ways that work, best or make most sense to me. All right, so the first thing that we need to do to this particular knife, well, to both of them really, and we'll just go ahead and finish out this one right here, is this finger groove feels too small to me. Okay, not by a whole lot, but it does feel too small. Okay, so the easiest way to fix this, actually I'll show you the cheaper or the more common way to do that, and that is with a Dremel tool. Now, I think I've shown you all this before. Let me back up here a little bit. Okay, so I've got just a plain Jane old Dremel tool, and it's held, the little doohickey is hanging on the whatchamacallit, right? And the whatchamacallit is just a 1/2 inch steel rod that is, put inside this piece of pipe that's got a bracket welded to it that's screwed onto the side of that, thingamajig, right? So, and then you put a flex shaft on it, and so it can move, well, if you got enough space in your, there you go. If you got enough swing in your plug-in, I mean, you can swing it all the way around the bench and work anywhere on the bench that you need to with it. Actually, you can't see that so much. Bring you back here. So, as long as you get, if you put an extension cord on it, you can sling that thing out and move it all over the place, right? And it works out really, really handy. So, for me, most of the time, more handy than just the Dremel tool body with no flex shaft. For this operation, it doesn't matter if you got the flex shaft or not, right? But it does make it kind of handy here. So you can use these little sanding drums. They've got the replaceable sanding things on there. Those would probably be my number one choice for that. And this has got a toolless chuck, which really is really nice. It's way better than the old pulling out the little wrench. Well, you guys have seen the little wrenches. So anyway, so these Dremel tools, these sanding discs, okay, because, well, actually, I guess you could do, you could use the sanding stone if you wanted to, because in here, in this finger choil here, all we're going to do is grind metal. Once you get up into here and you need to clean this spot up, then you're going to be grinding metal with a little bit of wood. So if you were using the stone, that wood would tend to clog it up. All right. So, well, yeah, I guess we don't have to do that either way. Just as long as you know about it. But you'd come up in here and, kind of, feather it back and forth, because that diameter of that wheel is, I want to say, like a 5/8 inch, something like that. And this is more suited to a 1 inch, 1 inch type radius. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to use my little bitty 1x42 horizontal grinder that I really need to rebuild. This was one of those, I saw the grinder and it was like $100 if I remember right, but it was a variable speed, third horse, third or a half horse, one of the two. I don't see where it's at right at the moment, but a variable speed third or a half horse motor, and I thought, man, that would run a little 1x42 horizontal belt grinder real nice. Well, I mean, it kind of does, but there's a whole bunch of issues with it, so I need to go ahead and just go ahead and build a 2x72 with a 1 horse or a 3/4, something like that, a horizontal belt grinder with small wheels, for doing work like this. I just haven't got to it yet. This one is insanely loud for what it is, but what we've got here is, I don't even think that's 1 inch, but I know it's quite a bit bigger than the Dremel wheel is. Let's figure out a spot to get you here. We get you just as close as we can. Maybe like that. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to come up in here and we're going to clean this, and we're going to clean this, and we're going to kind of knock off the corners of this, push this forward a little bit, and then just get it, smoothed up and feeling more comfy. Okay, that feels a lot better. I mean, that's something I'd carry now. Okay, so one thing I got to thinking about, while I'm while I was sitting there grinding that, is you know, having a whole bunch of different belt grinders, okay? And that part right there comes with, you know, I mean, it pretty much comes with time, okay? I mean, if you're a beginning knife maker and, you know, I mean, at the start, purchasing a 2x72 belt grinder, I mean, that seems like an awful dang lot of money for a belt grinder. I mean, I remember looking at the Grizzly and thinking, man, $600 for a belt grinder? And thinking, man, that's what it was back then. And I was thinking, man, that's an awful, I don't know how much they are now. I was thinking, man, that's an awful lot of money. I can buy an awful lot of steel and an awful lot of handle materials for that. And so, me being kind of handy and liking salvage yards and being a little bit on the cheap side, okay, maybe a lot on the cheap side, I just decided to build my first one. And, you know, I think I've told you all before, I think I've got like $150 into both of those belt grinders that sit on that stand. The other belt grinder, the one the three-wheeler that I built out of the treadmill, I want to say I have less than that into that one. Now, granted, that's straight up materials cost only, you know, and I already have welders and, you know, a pretty good selection of found materials and bolts and all that kind of stuff on hand. So, you know, so that's the route that I went, was kind of the Wayne Goddard approach, you know, which is, you know, you need something, just build the stuff and then get on with it. So when you're building grinders like that, it's an awful lot cheaper per grinder, maybe. Depends on how you factor your time in there. But it's, you know, it's pretty easy just to go ahead and just, you know, build another grinder. I mean, when you come across the materials to build it, you know, you find them cheap, you build the thing, and then you modify it to work the way you want to. And then, you know, you can add another grinder to your arsenal. And it might not be quite as simple for somebody who's paying, you know, retail price for a grinder. I mean, I run, you know, 3 2x72s, and now that I've got more room in this shop, I'm going to build 2 more. Another 3-wheeled grinder. That way I can leave this one set up with the surface grinding attachment. And then a horizontal grinder, you know, that's going to be 2x72 also. I just haven't gotten around to it because there's been an awful lot of work here. But anyways, you know, I mean, I built a small wheel attachment for the treadmill grinder, you know, so I could go ahead and swap that out. But it's so much easier to be able to leave machines up dedicated for one particular use. I know this particular one right here, man, it is so handy having that thing up, because then I don't have to, you know, change the 3-wheel grinder all the time for each individual operation. But anyways, so we've got that, you know, feeling pretty good. You know, I may end up a little bit later opening that up some more. I mean, there's a little bit of room that we could come in here another 20 thousandths, and maybe even come back another 10 thousandths or so, and that could make a difference. I'll just have to feel it and, you know, keep working with it and see what I like. Okay. So the 2 major ways to start on our hand sanding, okay, or the 2 major styles of fixtures, okay. Wait a minute. One more thing on shaping this area right here, because I got them out. So you got the Dremel tool, you got your, you know, grinder with a small wheel attachment. You've also got these. Now I picked these up on eBay when I was buying some stones to show you guys how to clean them up and recondition them. And this was just a part of one of the packages. And these are they're just sharpening stone rods, pretty much. This one right here feels awful fine. I'm not sure what these originally were for, how much they sold for, or whatever, but I've seen quite a few of them on eBay since. And they're just, you know, elongated sharpening sticks. Here's a brand new one with a handle from Norton. I don't remember what I paid for this, but I got it from sharpeningsupplies.com, if I remember right. And it's got a coarse and a fine, and it's a Norton silicon carbide stone on it with a handle. So I think that would work out really handy for sharpening axes and shovels and digging hoes, you know, things like that. And if you were to take one and shape it, it would also work really good up in here. So will a round, a dowel, or a half round or a round file. Okay, you would just wrap your sandpaper around either one of these, and then make it to shape the whatever shape it is that you need to sand, and sand away with these. I've done an awful lot of that, and it works really good, just not quite as fast as the dedicated machines. Okay, so the two different styles of fixtures that I've used to hold the knife while you're sanding the handle. I mean, I guess you can, tape everything up. Well, actually, let's go ahead and tape it up now. You can go ahead and tape everything up and hold it in your hand. I mean, if your workbench is, a towel across your lap, or a desk somewhere, or the kitchen table, something like that, there's nothing wrong with hand holding the thing. It's slower because you can't focus your force onto the workpiece like you could if it was clamped up in something solid. But you can certainly do it that way. All right. So the two ways that I use here, one of which is, come on, these right here. Okay. This particular vise, this was one of my first purchases when I decided to start making an awful lot of knives, back before I was even selling knives. So this particular vise swings around this way, right? And then you can lock it down. But one of the really cool things about this particular vise is you loosen up this over here and it swings this way. Okay? Now you can come up here and you've got these pipe jaws, right? Well, actually, you've got your flat jaws, you've got your pipe jaws, and then you've got these jaws up here that honestly I've never really used. I'm sure sooner or later I'll find a use for them. This particular thing right here, this is called a knife maker's vise, pipe vise, I guess whatever you want to call it. But pretty much what it is it's a piece of pipe. This one is probably 1.5 inch diameter. Okay, it's got you drill a couple of holes in the sides of the pipe that are kind of in line with each other, right? Yeah, y'all can see that. Drill a couple of holes in there that are big enough for these bolts to go through. What size the bolts are doesn't really matter. Then, if I want to say, I tried threading this, but it didn't really work out so well. So I just took nuts that matched the thread size of the bolt that I wanted to use, welded the nuts onto the pipe. Okay, then on the inside, you take two pieces of steel and you just glue pieces of leather to them. Okay, that's all that is. These pieces of steel aren't hardened or anything. Okay, they go in there. Now your knife, it goes in between the pieces of leather. You can pull it out, put the pieces of leather in there, push it in. Now tighten these bolts up. You don't have to tighten them up like a whole lot, but just snug them. Okay, now what you have is probably the simplest and the best way to hold a knife so that you can work on the handle that I've ever seen. All right, and if you're in the market for a new bench vise, it doesn't cost but maybe $10 worth of materials, depends on your scrap pile, to be able to build this part. This part is part of the vise. So you loosen it up, you can work on the back of the handle. Loosen it up, work on the front of the handle. Work on the side, work on this part, work on that part. If you're making something with a guard, turn it around, clamp it in like this. Can y'all see that? Okay. Yeah. Now you can come up and sand or file the underside of a guard. You can do anything you want to with it and put it pretty much in any kind of position that you want it to be in. All right. Works really, really slick. I really, really like it. Right. Now, for this style of handle and this style of handle attachment, you got to remember these scales are just held in place with epoxy right now. Okay, the epoxy bond is very strong, but you start pushing down on this, that blade is going to flex. When it flexes, it's going to pop this scale right off. Okay, because right now it has good strength going this way and this way, but not very much strength laterally, right? Okay, so we're not going to use this particular method right here for this style of handle. I mean, you can if that's all you have, but there's a little bit simpler way to do it that actually works a little bit better with this style of handle. Okay, so now we bring this back up, we get that lined up to where it's pretty much straight up and down, clamp that clamp right there. Alright, so now we got our bench vise. We're going to use a piece of leather that's, you know, doubled up, and this one's been used so many times that it just holds its shape all the time. Okay, now we just clamp that up. Let's tighten this up. Okay, now we can work on this spot right here, or the spine of the handle. We loosen it up, clamp it back down, and we can work on the front edge of the handle. Okay, we'll go ahead and smooth these two things up first, and then we'll go ahead and we'll go to my sanding stick and I'll show you how we do the flats. Okay, so for our actual sanding here, we are going to use, first we're going to grab a drink. We are going to use 220 grit sandpaper, and we're going to roll it up on our sanding stick, the same sanding stick that we use to hand sand the blade. Okay, we're going to go ahead and roll up our 220, and then in this case, this being burl, and burl likes a little bit higher grit finish. This is some 600 grit sandpaper. So we'll shape it with a 220, and then we'll finish it off with the 600, and then we'll move to a different spot of the handle. Now, one thing that I'm not going to do today, that I'm telling you that you ought to, let's get your, actually, you know what, let's put you in, but I'll just work around you. Okay, I'll just go like this. One thing I will tell you that I'm not going to do today, because, you know, I've got to talk, I mean, that's the point of the whole video, is wear a mask when you're doing this. Okay, you guys will see it, I bet you. Just pay attention to the air as the sanding stick is moving back and forth across the handle, and you'll see a whole bunch of dust kick up. I never really thought it was all that bad. And I can't remember what made me think about it one day, and then I was looking at it, I was like, holy cow, there was a whole bunch of dust up in the air here. Now remember, this is you know, stabilized burl, right? Which means that there is a whole bunch of basically epoxy that you're going to be breathing, that's floating around up in the air. Something else like cocobolo, you know, the cocobolo, I've told you, can be, you know, folks can have allergies to it pretty bad. Yeah, see all that dust falling off the underside there? Oh, well, I can see it. Maybe you can't see it, or maybe you will. So anyhow, and then, you know, as this gets folded over, this becomes like a, you know, a rounded, almost like a dowel shaped. So you can get up in there and get you some curves going on. And if you get too close, pull it out some. Just remember, no forces side this way, okay? Because that'll tend to want to pop your scales loose. Once you have pins in there, then those pins and the rigidity of the scales and the you know, the tang and everything usually keeps everything pretty much together. All right. Okay, so that's looking and feeling pretty smooth. Using a backup stick like this is usually a pretty nice idea, because then you won't tend to undercut the metal quite as much as you would if you were to just grab a piece of sandpaper and start sanding it, because the backup stick kind of keeps everything flat against the highest feature, the highest and the hardest feature on the knife. All right, so now let's go ahead and come up in here and clean this up with a 600 grit stick. Don't forget to shine up the metal there in the curve, because remember that's got a, I want to say that's a 220 grit belt on it, or it might be a 300 grit belt, something like that. And you won't get this portion right in here near as nice of a finish, but pretty much with running the 600 grit over the top of it like this, you shine up the tops, and it'll make it look pretty nice. Okay. Now you can just kind of rub that really, almost like you're buffing it with your finger, and it'll shine it up considerably. See that? That looks like a pretty good finish right there for, you know, the 2 or 3 minutes that it took. Okay, so now you see we still got all these scratches on the sides, but right up in here it's nice and smooth and feels really good. Okay, now we'll do the spine of the handle. The part on the little handle on the camera, or the tripod here, is like right in my chest. So what's happening is back you up even more. What's happening is I'm sanding like this, and then having to look around the camera as we go. But as long as we're just doing one this way, that'll be fine. Okay, now up in here, we're still a little bit square. So let's kind of round that off some. Another really kind of handy way to do this, depends on the knife and depends on your mood and which way you want to do it, is using a shoe shine motion. And for that, really, you kind of need a special kind of sandpaper. These shop rolls right here. Get these from Jantz also, but I think everybody else sells them, you know, Pops and everybody else. This is a 1.5 inch wide by 50 yards, 220 grit belt. There's your part number, but this is, heck, this has been in my shop for at least a couple of years. And you get this 220 grit shop roll. Okay, now it's a cloth backed abrasive, and it is very tough. Okay, so you can take that stuff and go like this with it, you know, and really round things off if that's what you're after. And I used to use them all the time, but then honestly I started doing it this way, and it does a pretty good job too. And a little bit of, okay, I think we're, whoa, oh boy. Okay, everything looks pretty good there. We'll go ahead and hit it with the 600 grit. Okay, we'll just shine it up there. Now we're starting to get a good idea about what this handle is going to end up looking like. and it's going to be a nice one. Okay, so we got the front of the handle done and the rear of the handle done. Now we got to do the sides. And for the sides, we come back over to our handy dandy sanding stick that we use to sand blades. And we grab another drink. Okay, now for this part, like I said, our handle has got great strength right now just with the epoxy this way and, let's see, this way and this way. But it has hardly any strength going this way, right? So what we want to do is we want to clamp this up in a manner that it holds it still, but won't allow this to, won't allow the blade to flex, because if it flexes, it's going to pop them scales off, right? That is not, that it'll pop the scales off does not mean that the epoxy or that the handle scales or that the blade is weak in any manner at all. It just has to do with leverage, okay? That epoxy can only grab so much this away, all right? So what you do is we are gonna, use my folded over leather, okay? And I place it up here and I see how much flex there's going to be. So if you were to go like this, so I don't have to drop the camera down. Okay, see how right there the high spot of this handle is touching, but if we clamp this, it's going to flex that, right? So what we're going to need is a little bit of a shim. That will probably work. So what we're going to do is clamp it like this, only up, up, and down. We'll clamp it up here where the shim is just a little bit thicker, and then that way the opposite side of the handle will stop it from flexing. And it'll hold it nice and secure, and we'll be able to work on it. Now this part right here, snug is good enough, okay? I mean, you don't want to like really reef down on this thing. I mean, just hold it snug to where it'll resist the force of you sanding it. Sure, there's nothing on there. We're going to need our sanding sticks. Tear off a piece. Now this is the part where we really get to start seeing what this handle's going to look like. And honestly, it's always kind of exciting. Because you look at the, the block of wood that you're going to make the handle scales out of, and you think, okay, well, yes, that block of wood looks pretty, or no, it does not look pretty. But you're not seeing the wood that's gonna be visible in the finished handle. You're just seeing the wood that's visible on the surface of the block. So it's always a surprise once you get the handle scales on there and you get them ground down, and then once you finally get up there and you get them down to this point is when you finally get to see what it's going to look like. Okay. Now what we're looking for here is we're looking for any more of those 36 grit or deep scratches. And I don't see any, so we're going to hit it with the 600. So what we're doing there is just buffing it with my hand and my finger there, and the oil that's in my hand will kind of bring up a shine. and then we'll kind of get to see what it looks like. Let me grab some reading glasses here and get a little bit closer look at it. Okay, so we've still got a couple of scratches right up in here, right? Okay, we're not quite all the way up in here. Okay, so we got those fixed. Now these scratches right in here, we are not going to bother with them at the moment, okay, because we still have to put our pins in, okay. Once we put our pins in, then we're going to have to grind the heads of the pins off and then refinish this surface, okay. So what we're really after is this portion right around the outside, okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and, yeah, see the difference? There's, let's see, make sure there's no glare there. Real nice and pretty, kinda not so pretty. So let's catch the other side up. You can also do a leather-faced sanding stick, like something like this, where this is just a, I don't know if that's a paint stick from Home Depot. I know I've used it an awful lot. It used to be this color, the whole thing. And then I just used some, that rubber cement, that barge cement that you use for making sheaths, and I just barge cemented this piece of leather to the wood, and it has a little bit of flex, you know, this away, plus the leather is not a real hard surface, so it's a good good sanding stick for handles also. Now remember, the more work you do with the 220, to a point of course, the less work you have to do with the 600. And I typically like to sand everything in this direction. You know, to get your finest finish on steel, you would sand this direction and then sand this direction, okay? Handle materials, I guess, could kind of be the same way, but if you look at all the wood that's floating in the air down from this 600 grit paper, I don't really think you gain all that much, except for you lose a whole bunch of time. And you notice with these flat sanding sticks, I don't really keep the stick still very much. I mean, it's constantly moving this way, you know, so that you're never, I mean, it's a flat stick, but you're making a very convex finish with a flat stick. Okay, I believe we are done there. No, we got a little bit, couple of little lines right here. There we go. you away from that bright light there. And you can see that's going to be a pretty nice looking handle. All of our lines around the perimeter, you know, the profile of the blade, they're all going this way. So they'll look nice. And then we got a pretty good finish. Everything's shaped. It feels good. Feels good in both hands. If you can, if you got the choice, try to make a knife feel good in both hands, because you never know when you're gonna end up having to make a cut with your offhand. Okay, so that particular that knife is done. The handle is pretty much done with the hand sanding. Okay, our next step in the next video is going to be prepping these holes to accept pins, prepping the pins, peening the pins, grinding the heads of the pins off, and then finishing up the hand sanding, because when we grind the heads of the pins off, we'll end up messing up our hand sanding job here in just a couple of places. So we'll have to come back and hand sand that to clean it up. We'll also have to come up in here and clean this portion up here up, because this right here is a sharp corner. All right, that sharp corner doesn't feel all that great, and it'll hang up when we go to resheath the knife. Okay, so we'll have to take care of that. But once we get done with those, get all that dust in there. Once we get done with that, then we are on to taking the tape off. Then I go ahead and round the spines off and rough in an edge just off the belt grinder. Then make the sheath, and then come back and clean everything up and sharpen it, and pretty much we're done. Okay, so again, this was hand sanding the handle, making it look all nice and pretty, getting it you know, to where it feels right. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Wait a minute. Again, this is Joe Calton with Calton Cutlery, and visit me on the web, caltoncutlery.com. Hope you all enjoyed the video, and we will see you next time.